Ghostly encounters, UFO sightings, and bizarre creatures that lurk in the night often take the cake when it comes to spine-chilling tales. But on the odd occasion, the mind-bending enigma of disappearing without a trace comes into play, replacing that sense of horror with dread. Number 10. It was June 2014 when something strange was afoot in Houston, Texas. One resident, Brian Patrick Miller, was doing something very out of the ordinary. He'd withdrawn a very large sum of cash from his trust fund, $18,000 to be exact. Then he packed up some of his personal belongings and loaded them into a silver 2000 Chevrolet Malibu. Sometime on the 1st of June, Brian headed to his best friend's house, unloaded his vehicle, leaving all those personal items on the front porch. He also left behind a note that instructed his friend to give the items to specific people. The very next day, when the friend, referred to as J.E., discovered the belongings on his front porch, he reported Brian missing to the Harris County Sheriff's Office. Several days later, on the 6th of June, the Chevrolet was discovered abandoned on US 79 West. It was abandoned between Jacksonville and Palestine, Texas, 4 hours north of Houston. Upon running the number plate, police discovered a missing person report and quickly investigated the car and the surroundings, but they didn't find anything that would lead them to his whereabouts. The 31-year-old Houston resident had vanished. Given his strange behavior prior to his disappearance, police and some friends jumped to immediate conclusions, but family insisted that he had not vanished willingly. Texas state troopers who discovered the vehicle made contact with the sheriff's office. They informed an investigator that a vehicle connected to a missing person case had been found, but according to family members, the investigator didn't respond to this tip in a timely manner. Brian's vehicle, despite being a potential host for evidence, was destroyed. It's alleged that there's evidence indicating foul play, a claim that's yet to be confirmed, and family members are suspicious about certain stories that have come about. The disappearance of Brian Miller wasn't properly investigated until mid-August, after a similar case arose. That same year in July, Javier Jimenez was reported missing in the area, and a few days later, he was found deceased in the back of his pickup truck. Months prior to Brian and Javier's disappearances, another resident, Randall Robertson, was also reported missing. On the 23rd of January, 2 days after he vanished, his vehicle was discovered abandoned and remains missing. Authorities have not confirmed if these cases are connected, but they do share some strange similarities, including that each one took place within a 2-mile radius of the other, leading many to believe that Brian met a sinister fate. Information regarding this missing person can be directed to the Harris County Sheriff's Office at 713-274-9360. Number 9. Dr. Joshua Hull was working out of Temple, Texas as a successful physician at the Central Texas Veterans Healthcare System. He led a quiet life and had high online ratings for his medical service. Patients say that he was calm, informative, and always able to answer their questions. Another characteristic that Hull had was that he never seemed alarmed by anything. According to his clients, based on these ratings and descriptions from family and friends, Hull was a straightforward individual living a simplistic life. That was until 2018, when things took a daunting turn. In July of that year, the 37-year-old doctor of internal medicine unexpectedly moved out of his apartment, according to a roommate. Most strangely, it appeared that the successful practitioner also left his clinic that year, possibly in the days before moving out of his shared home. But it hasn't been confirmed whether he left of his own accord, or if he'd been fired, although there seems to be no reason why he would have been terminated from his position, or why he would have wanted to quit. Even though Hull left his post and moved out of his home, he still maintained contact with his family. But in October, all of that communication eerily ceased. Over the course of several days, Hull's mother grew more and more concerned. She hadn't heard from him since the 13th of October, and by the 22nd, she would report him missing to the Temple Police Department. It was only at this time that she would learn that her son had left his job and his apartment. Efforts to locate any sign of the missing doctor proved futile. Search efforts yielded no results, and it wouldn't be until the late days of November that the first break in the case would be made. The breakthrough came from the discovery of a black 2014 Audi Q4 belonging to the doctor. Oddly, it had been discovered at the Port of Portland International Airport in Oregon. This update wasn't made public until April of the next year. For an unknown reason, authorities had kept this information about the vehicle a secret. As search efforts and investigations were ongoing, Hull's medical license became delinquent. This was because he hadn't been paying for it, something that was truly out of the ordinary. Even if he had chosen to start a new life elsewhere, a medical license is certainly something he would have wanted to hang on to. All of these strange details, and lack thereof, have left behind an enduring question. Where is Dr. Joshua Hull? Number 8. In the autonomous region of Extremadura, Spain, lies the small town of Hornachos, housing just over 3,500 people. Making up part of that population was the Marquez family, the husband and 2 children of Francisca Cadenas Marquez. Francisca, a reserved and friendly woman, was living a quiet life with her farmer husband. As a reserved individual and part of the Hornachos culture, she had no social media accounts. For Francisca, there was no life beyond the confines of her small town. She knew no one outside of her immediate circle. This is why her enigmatic disappearance comes as such a shock. It was the 9th of May in 2017. Night was drawing on, and Francisca found herself babysitting the daughter of her friend at her home. It was 11:15 p.m. when the parents of the toddler arrived outside. Francisca occupied the family in their car and told her son that she'd be back to make them dinner. Francisca's house and her friend's car were on separate streets, but connected by a 50-meter-long alleyway that was lined with streetlights, making it easy to navigate. As the family got into the car, the friends made another babysitting arrangement for the very next day. The car pulled out of its parking spot, and the friends watched Francisca retreat into the alleyway in the rearview mirror. Then she vanished. It was as simple as that, gone in the blink of an eye, somewhere in the darkness of the night. It would have only taken her 60 steps or so to get from one end of the alley to the other. Back at home, the 2 sons sat waiting for the return of their mother and their dinner preparation. It should have taken less than 5 minutes for her to return, but she never made it there. Moments had passed, and worry began to set in, prompting her husband to call the friend that Francisca had just been babysitting for. He asked if she'd gotten into the car with them, a question that sent chills down her spine. Francisca had most certainly not gotten into the vehicle with them. In just 10 minutes after her disappearance, she was reported missing. A police investigation began immediately. The town was mobilized, and within several minutes, a search party had formed. It was one of the quickest search operations ever. Authorities discovered that Francisca's medication, cell phone, and wallet had all been left at home. If she was planning on going somewhere, it wouldn't have been far. An investigation of the alley itself was carried out, and police could find no signs of a struggle, no evidence of foul play, and not even a trace of an accident. The authorities scoured every nearby well, hoping that she may have accidentally fallen down one of them. 50 wells were searched, and cameras were lowered into them, but they found nothing. Most hauntingly, sniffer dogs were brought in, but they couldn't pick up on her scent. The same canines were taken to the mountains and the swamps on the outskirts of Hornachos. There was no sign of Francisca anywhere. Police would even obtain search warrants for unoccupied houses and search neighbors' homes. In this missing person case, diverging from the norm, no stone was left unturned. Despite these efforts, though, the woman remained missing. Francisca was wearing a pink t-shirt, which allowed her to stand out against the dark backdrop of the evening. As news of her disappearance began to make the rounds, only one witness emerged that night. A 33-year-old man, a seasonal worker from the Dominican Republic, had been walking down the street. He reported to the police that he'd spotted Francisca walking on the sidewalk towards her home. He didn't know her name, and the two never interacted before this day. As he slipped into his car, the two exchanged a brief greeting. Based on this man's account, Francisca should have been no more than 20 steps from her home. Of course, being the last person to have seen her, the police immediately suspected the man. Their suspicion was only bolstered by his criminal record. He'd been charged with assault and convicted of attempted homicide before. But upon further investigation, they discovered that he had an airtight alibi. Despite this, many rumors still circulate about him. Some labeled him as a trafficker or even a hitman. These rumors contributed to the seasonal workers' decision to leave Hornachos altogether. It was in 2019 when that unfortunate day came, the day that the case would be closed by the police and left unsolved. Number 7. It was the 30th of July in 2016 when a strange discovery was made in Carlsbad, California. It was a gray Honda Civic abandoned in a cul-de-sac near Buena Vista Lagoon, the Oceanside and Carlsbad border. An officer with the Carlsbad police had been noticing the driverless vehicle there for days. Days turned into weeks, with no driver coming to claim their vehicle, and that was because the driver was missing. On the 11th of August, the officer ran the plate number and discovered something foreboding. The car was connected to an eerie disappearance. The discovery of the abandoned vehicle was not a good sign of things to come. The vehicle was connected to Ibrahim Puldar, and he was missing. Just 5 days after the initial discovery of the Civic being made, his brother reported him missing, entering the car's license plate into the database. According to this, the actual owner of the car had also reported the vehicle as lost. Puldar, it turned out, had borrowed the vehicle from a friend and had driven far away from his hometown. 56-year-old Puldar was a resident of Westwood, Los Angeles, and as far as the police could tell, he had no relatives, friends, or business relations in the San Diego area. So what was he doing there? It became immediately clear that he was missing under some peculiar circumstances, leaving authorities, family, and friends searching for answers. After piecing together that the abandoned car was connected to the disappearance, police began scouring the area for any clues or evidence that may lead to the man's whereabouts, and they certainly found something quite unusual. On the 25th of August, about a mile away from the car, LAPD detectives came across Puldar's keys, wallet, and pants. These items were found in the brush along the 2200 block of Jefferson Street. The abandoned vehicle was found 2 hours away from where the man lived. Coupled with the scatter of items and the fact that he had no known medical conditions, it made for an ominous concoction in this alarming disappearance. Family has been left gravely concerned for his well-being. They indicate that he had no reason to go missing. It was also alleged that Puldar enjoyed drinking and gambling, the suggestion that he may have been met with foul play connected to either of these enjoyments. There's no doubt that the Los Angeles residents are missing under suspicious circumstances, but no evidence has come to suggest that foul play was involved. The man was just gone. Despite extensive search efforts, including the use of tracking dogs, Puldar remains missing, and any information can be directed to the LAPD's Missing Person Unit at 213-996-1800. Number 6. Darla Melissa Harper graduated from Pine Bluff High School in 1977 and began working in the Little Rock office of the IRS, never missing a single day of work until 1986. On the 4th of March that year, Darla would spend her evening talking with a neighbor at her Gravel Ridge, Arkansas apartment. Around 9:30 that evening, that neighbor would leave the home and return to their own. 25-year-old Darla was left alone with her young daughter in the small house, and what happened after this is bound to send chills down anyone's spine. Following her encounter with the neighbor, Darla was never seen again. The following day, her manager grew concerned when she failed to show up to work. For the 4 years that she'd been working there, she hadn't missed a single day without notifying anyone. Calls to the home went unanswered, and with concerns rising, a coworker headed over to Gravel Ridge to make sure that Darla was okay. When they arrived there, they discovered a disturbing sight. Darla wasn't there. Her door was wide open, and the young daughter was left alone inside. She was confused but unharmed. While there were no obvious signs of a struggle, a red streak did stain the door, prompting the coworker to immediately contact the Pine Bluff Police Department. Darla was reported missing and possibly injured, and the hunt for the missing mother began. Pulaski County Sheriff's Office deputies were the first to arrive in Gravel Ridge. At first, they were uncertain of what they'd be walking into, wondering if it was just a simple disappearance. But when they arrived inside and discovered the vital fluid and an unaccompanied toddler, They knew that something much more sinister had taken place that evening. Deputies did a quick sweep around the area, including the apartment's parking lot, where they discovered that Darla's car was missing. For a moment, they wondered if she'd driven out on her own accord for reasons unknown, but after speaking to neighbors, it was clear that this was not the case. One of the first people the police had spoken to was the neighbor who was at Darla's house the evening prior. She explained that the missing woman was in good spirits when she left the apartment, but around 11 p.m., she heard noises coming from it. It sounded as though the furniture was being moved around. By the time the neighbor had gotten to the phone to call Darla, the noises had stopped. She didn't want to risk waking up the toddler, so she replaced the phone without calling, a mistake she would soon regret. Another neighbor would later report seeing the woman being dragged from the apartment in a bag, but this allegation couldn't be verified. Darla's mother was adamant that her daughter wouldn't leave her child behind and insisted that something terrible must have happened. Mel Nixon began giving the police vital information on her daughter, including the fact that she was going through a divorce with a man named Barry Harper. When detectives reached out to him, he quickly denied knowing anything about the sudden disappearance. Even after being repeatedly questioned, Barry maintained his innocence. No evidence could be found that linked him to the crime, and authorities were forced to look elsewhere. Just a day after Darla was officially reported missing, her vehicle was located. It had been abandoned in a parking lot near Crystal Hill, 9 miles away from the apartment, in an area she was not known to frequent. A small amount of vital fluid was discovered in the vehicle, along with an unidentified set of fingerprints. But the most daunting clue of them all was the one spoken by the missing woman's daughter, who may have witnessed the crime. She told the police that 3 men wearing funny hats had entered the apartment, detailing that her mother was placed into a bag and that her feet were broken. While police couldn't confirm if the story was factual, it was clear that she'd seen something incredibly traumatic. After exhausting all leads, the case went cold and lay dormant for the next few years. Then, in 1990, an unexpected tip came in. It was from Barry Harper's wife, who claimed that Darla was buried in the backyard. But after searching the property, police came up empty-handed again. In 2009, another possible lead came in when a man walking his dog discovered a shallow grave not far from Darla's apartment. But again, nothing of interest was found here, and the case of Darla Harper went dormant again and remains a spine-chilling mystery. Number 5. By 2007, Lark Lorraine Montague and Dennis had been married for 23 years. The pair had 2 children together, a son and a daughter. They were both adults at the time. Brittany, the daughter, had 3 children of her own, but Lark had custody of them, and her daughter paid child support. But alternative sources indicate that this was a babysitting arrangement, leaving the true dynamic of the situation unclear. Despite this odd situation, life for the 55-year-old was going well, and nothing seemed too out of the ordinary. So why did she enigmatically disappear? It all started on the 21st of September, 2007, the evening that Dennis had taken his prescribed Ambien, a medication used for treating insomnia. As he settled down and started to relax, he wandered off to sleep, and he noticed something unusual. Lark, his wife, was in the hallway, seemingly pacing back and forth. It seemed as though she was waiting for him to fall asleep, which, according to Dennis, she was. He alleged that after he had fallen asleep, Lark slipped out of the house. She had taken her husband's 2002 Chevrolet Trailblazer, which had a Utah license plate of 215 LTE. Dennis would claim that Lark had started consuming intoxicants more so than usual, and her unexpected nightly trip had taken her to a neighbor's home. Here, the 2 friends drank together and chatted until the early hours of the following morning. According to the friendly neighbor, between 2:30 and 3 a.m., Lark left his residence in the Chevrolet, and he followed closely behind her, ensuring that she would get home safely. Dimly lit by streetlights, the 2 headed to Lark and Dennis's home, but then something peculiar happened. After having pulled into the driveway, the neighbor watched as Lark abruptly pulled out again, striking the fence behind her in the process. The truck was damaged, but the extent of the damage remains uncertain. At first, the friend indicated that it may have just been a broken taillight, and then said there may be damage to the rear door, but possibly that the entire driver's side had been scratched up. Lark, though, didn't stop driving, but instead carried on down the road and drove away. And that was the last time anyone would see her. There is one possible but unconfirmed sighting of the silver Chevrolet that came just moments later. The sighting came from the Cyprus Credit Union, where the vehicle was driving in downtown Manga. According to the report, the driver had veered and swerved before heading down Highway 111. It's still uncertain if this was Lark, but even so, she and the vehicle have never been seen again. On the morning of the 22nd of September, Dennis awoke and immediately began searching for Lark and his truck. He couldn't find her at any of the bars, restaurants, or any other areas she was known to frequent. Lark's absence was nothing short of troubling. As a type 2 diabetic, she needed medication that she had left behind at home. Family doesn't believe that she would have willingly left her grandchildren behind, but law enforcement thought that she had left of her own free will. They changed this position when subsequent searches yielded no results. After scouring several areas and conducting numerous investigations, Lark and the truck remain missing. Information regarding this missing person case can be directed to the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Department at 801-743-7000. Number 4. In the lively town of Helena, Montana, an intriguing mystery began to unfold. It was the spine-chilling mystery attached to one young man, 23-year-old Shannon Claire LeBeau. Just after he graduated from high school, Shannon became absorbed in a romance with a woman named Leslie, and it wasn't long before the happy couple welcomed a baby girl into the world. Shannon adored his daughter and was just trying to make a life for himself. The couple was living separately, they weren't married, and they were trying to make ends meet. In hopes of making things work, the young man began working as a chef at a local sports bar, where his mischievous, jokester demeanor made him a well-liked individual. He was always willing to lend a hand whenever he was needed. He even picked up extra shifts if a coworker was unable to make it work. Described as a family man, Shannon was extremely close with his mother and always made time for her. He preferred a small circle of friends, mostly made up of his own relatives. He also befriended a fellow peer back in high school, someone who was the complete opposite of himself. Steve was rough around the edges with anger issues and a reputation as the school bully, whereas Shannon was soft, kind, and lacked confidence. In 1999, things began looking up for the young man. He had just sold his car and was planning to buy a new one. In fact, Steve had heard about a muscle car that was being sold by a farmer in Townsend. So on the 23rd of February of that year, the two friends made plans to travel out there and have a look at the car, with possible plans to purchase it. At around 9 that morning, Shannon was spotted on camera at a local bank on Kessler Street, located in downtown Helena. He'd drawn $3,000 that he could take with him, just in case he ended up buying that muscle car that he now had his eyes set on. Following this, the family indicated that Steve came to pick Shannon up in the area, and that would be the last time that anyone would see him. Steve arrived back in town that evening, but his friend wasn't with him. Shannon's mother, Sally, questioned him on her son's whereabouts, and Steve claimed to have dropped him off around 11 that morning in the same area. He said he didn't want the car after all, especially after the farmer had unexpectedly raised the price. He'd later change his story, stating that he'd dropped his friend off near his apartment instead, and in a different story, he stated that Shannon had gotten a lift in Butte, Montana. What's even more strange is that Shannon allegedly left some instructions for his mother, which would be relayed to her through Steve. She was asked to pick up his paycheck and lock up his mobile home, an aspect that made the case all the more strange. Sally knew something was wrong, but it wasn't until the next day, when Shannon didn't show up for work, that she reported him missing. The police were immediately concerned for his well-being, given the obscure details, and launched a quick investigation. They were unable to determine who the owner of the muscle car was, and therefore couldn't really investigate the area or question the seller about the missing man's whereabouts. Shannon also had an appointment with an optometrist to renew his contact lens prescription, but he never showed up for that. He left money behind in his bank account, which has seen no activity, as well as uncollected paychecks. Even though sources indicate that Steve had picked him up, Shannon's own red 1976 Chevrolet truck with the Montana license plate, 5T31420, allegedly disappeared too, and has not been recovered. Number 3. Joanne Benner was 21 years old and had a whole life ahead of her with her 2 young daughters. She was a strong-willed and good person according to her family. So when she vanished in the middle of the night, the Florida community was left utterly shocked. But the most shocking aspects of the case were yet to be made, making this a sinister disappearance. It was the 13th of May in 1976. Joanne was home on Titus Road in Bayou Gorge. It was here in the middle of the night that she was last seen. Gary Benner woke up the next morning to find that his wife hadn't returned home. According to him, she left in the middle of the night and never came back. When Gary reported his wife to the authorities, they immediately began to investigate. They headed to the Benners' home and spoke with Gary, who claimed that Joanne had left a note behind. The alleged note was supposedly written by Joanne, in which she cited her reasons for leaving. Then she packed her things and left. This was the official statement made by Gary, who police stated was acting rather unusual at the time. During their initial investigation, police would discover some strange red spots in several areas of the home, including on a phone. A section of a carpet had also been removed and was found in the trash can, having been set alight. When Gary was confronted about the red spots, he offered the investigators 2 responses, one of which was that it was red fingernail polish, and the other stated that it was vital fluid that Joanne had thrown at him during a fight. Not fully believing this obscure explanation, the police saw Gary as the prime suspect. Things took a harrowing turn when new information was offered to investigators from the mouth of Joanne's young daughter. She told family members that her mother had left the house urgently, seemingly in physical distress, and apparently with vital fluid running from her stomach. But given the age of the witness and the indirect way in which the information was passed along, this claim couldn't be confirmed, and there would likely be more trace evidence in the home if this is what happened. Making this case even stranger is that following Joanne's enigmatic disappearance, Gary asked friends to email toys and letters to the children, pretending to be their mother. Investigators were able to retrieve samples of the vital fluid found in the home, but back then, DNA testing was not an option. For years, the samples sat in evidence, and by 2008, when officials tried to submit them for analysis, they were too degraded to be used. Ever since, the case has hit a brick wall. No one knows what happened to Joanne or what took place that evening. All that's known is that she's gone. No one has ever seen or heard from her again, and the case remains hauntingly unsolved. Number 2. Deborah Dean Poe was raised in Northern Virginia, but by 1989 she was 26 years old. She opted to move somewhere else. Deborah decided on Orlando, Florida as her new home, and here she would work 2 jobs. One of them was at a local Circle K gas station on Aloma Avenue and Hall Road. She also worked in the retail sales department of the Orlando Sentinel during the day. When she secured her position at the Orlando Sentinel, her family and her partner tried to convince her to quit the Circle K night shift job, but she refused because she wanted the extra money that would allow her to buy her own house and open up her dream catering business. The urgency expressed by the family wasn't unwarranted. There had been several strange and distressing encounters in the dimly lit store during the evenings. Once, in January of 1990, an unclothed man entered the store and began to harass Deborah by chasing her around the store grounds. She was able to make an escape by locking herself in the store and calling the police, but by the time they arrived, the man was gone. Despite this encounter, Deborah insisted on staying at the job. It wasn't even a month later, after this encounter, that she would mysteriously disappear. It was the 4th of February when she headed out to her usual shift. Her partner had last seen her around 1 a.m. inside the store. Everything appeared normal. At 3 a.m., a friend had driven past and saw Deborah behind the counter, but this would be the last time that anyone would see her. Just 15 minutes later, a customer came into the store and found a 19 to 25-year-old man standing behind the counter in Deborah's place. He had long, stringy black hair and was wearing a Megadeth t-shirt. He also wore a skull ring and a wire earring with a cross dangling from it in his right ear. The customer also had a black van parked outside with the Megadeth logo airbrushed on it. She assumed that the strange man was probably another clerk, but grew suspicious when she had to point out where the cigarettes were when she asked for a pack. Before the customer left, the clerk said, "You shouldn't smoke, you know." Despite this detailed description, police were never able to locate the man whom the customer had encountered. At around 4 a.m., the police were alerted to the empty Circle K store when another entrant found it open and with no one behind the counter. No money was missing from the register, and Deborah's uniform was neatly folded in the bag. Her red Toyota Celica was outside, with her purse, car keys, and paycheck locked inside. There were no signs of a struggle inside the store or around the vehicle. In fact, there was absolutely nothing that might lead to the young woman's whereabouts. Tracker dogs were later brought in and managed to sniff her out to a wooden fence, but quickly lost the trail. Authorities began to suspect that Deborah had been forcibly taken, and no one had been around to witness it. Despite announcing a suspect in 2002 and re-examining the evidence present, the case remains cold. Deborah Poe remains missing for over 30 years, and police are no closer to finding her. Number 1. David Lovely is the young man who took a road trip into oblivion. His story is set in Massachusetts in 1965, when he was born to Ellen Jackie Aubett and was one of 5 siblings. He had a younger brother and sister named Brian and Allison, as well as 2 older sisters, Cindy and Karen. David was host to a series of medical issues. At the very young age of 3, he underwent a major surgery when it was discovered that his kidneys were too large. He was hospitalized for months. The operation left him unable to play sports or consume alcohol. He was also 20 pounds lighter than he should have been. In the spring of 1985, following the divorce of his parents, David, who was now 19 years old, decided to move in with his father in California. Jackie followed suit, but within months opted to head back to Massachusetts. This time, David would go with her, and that summer, a cross-country endeavor began. An endeavor that was ill-fated and marked the start of an enduring mystery. The young man would be traveling across the country on his maroon 1978 Model 1100 Yamaha motorbike that was overwhelmed with luggage and saddlebags overflowing with his possessions. Jackie was driving the yellow Ryder truck, towing another pickup truck that was being driven by Allison. The family established a system in which every 30 miles the vehicles would check in with one another, especially since the motorbike was going much faster than the truck that was towing another vehicle. The family was able to make it to Great Salt Lake, Utah, without any issues, and on the 4th of August of that year, they departed Salt Lake City, with their next stop being Evanston, Wyoming, at a petrol station. The 3 met up at the gas station, with David opting to push ahead, leaving his mother and sister behind. The motorcycle had been giving him trouble, so he didn't want to risk pulling over and not getting it started again. So he decided to push ahead to the next stop, hoping to find a mechanic there. No one knew it at the time, but as David continued down the road, this would be the last time that anyone would see him. The young man headed off alone, and as suspected, his motorbike broke down somewhere after Evanston. He would spend that Sunday evening on the side of the highway, and the next morning began to push his bike to Bingo Truck Stop in Fort Bridger, Wyoming, 30 miles from Evanston. David managed to get a hold of his mother using the payphone at the truck stop. He indicated to Jackie that he initially felt uncomfortable or afraid when he first encountered the rough-looking mechanic, but allegedly began to feel more at ease. The family opted to reconvene in Rock Springs, 70 miles away. David promised to phone them once he reached the area, but after that Bingo Truck Stop call, he was never heard from again. After waiting for some time at the meetup point, Jackie and Allison thought that he decided to push forward to Massachusetts instead, so they carried on by themselves. But when they arrived back at home, they'd found that David was nowhere to be seen. Something was clearly wrong. Jackie alerted authorities, but they didn't take an immediate interest in the case. It wasn't until 9 days later that they would truly begin their search. It was those 9 days later that a passerby discovered a bike abandoned on the roadside in Rock Springs, a foreboding finding. It was left on a dirt road, surrounded by nothing but empty desert. The bike was almost certainly David's. The keys were in the ignition, and it was in working condition. Despite investigators and search efforts, no trace of David could be found in the area. Only bits and pieces of information have surfaced online over the years. Strange pieces of the puzzle have emerged, but none of them have led to his whereabouts. To this day, no one knows what happened to David Lovely, and his case remains unsolved. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.